All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. We are continuing our player rankings today with number 9 and number 8. We also, predictably, whoever we put at number 10 or number 11, those fan bases were going to be very upset. Got a lot of upset Joel Embiid fans, a lot of upset Steph Curry fans. We have a mailbag section at the tail end of the show where I took a bunch of your guys' stuff. I took some specific, well-thought-out basketball arguments against my case. We're going to kind of have a little debate in the mailbag section at the tail end of the show. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget it's helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. And then last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments. We're going to be using those mailbag questions to do the debate segment at the tail end of the show. So if you disagree with the ranking, make a basketball case. We'll get into it in the mailbag. All right, let's talk some basketball. So before we go to number 9 and number 8, as I've had to continually kind of reiterate, remember the purpose of this list. This is not a who's the best basketball player for a series that starts tomorrow. Obviously, that would look very different, right? And we're going to make multiple references to this today. But if I was ranking my top 5 guys to start a series that started tomorrow, LeBron and Steph are both in that top 5. They're probably not above Jokic and Luka for me, but they're in the top 5. But I don't have them in the top 5 because this isn't how this particular list works. The pursuit of an NBA championship is not about a playoff series that starts tomorrow. It's not even about a playoff run that starts tomorrow. You don't get to teleport to June and just play for all the marbles, especially out in the Western Conference, where there's considerably more talent. There are 13 teams that are actively trying to win the title out of the Western Conference, or at least actively trying to make the playoffs. I'd say 11 probably want to actually legitimately try to win the title, and 13 are trying to make the playoffs. Oklahoma City, Denver, Minnesota, the Clippers, Lakers, the Dallas Mavericks, the Phoenix Suns, the New Orleans Pelicans, the Sacramento Kings, the Golden State Warriors, the Houston Rockets are going to be trying to win. The Memphis Grizzlies are going to be right back at the top of the conference. And you bet your ass Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama out in San Antonio are going to be trying to make the playoffs. So again, 11 teams desperately fighting, and 13 that are certainly going to think they're going to be a playoff team. Only 8 are going to get in. You have to navigate 82 games from October all the way potentially to a 7-game series that starts in June. That's a 9-month span, guys. So to put it simply, who's the best player in a series that starts tomorrow just isn't a realistic way to rank players. Unless the series actually starts tomorrow, which it doesn't. And so LeBron, KD, and Steph are all players that I believe can outplay basically any star in the league in a series except for maybe Luka and Jokic, and I still think they can go toe-to-toe with those guys in a series. But they all 3 of those, LeBron, KD, and Steph, do struggle to maintain that level over 82 games at this point, which is something that if you were a GM and we were doing this actual exercise, meaning like all 450 players are available, we are drafting for this upcoming season, as a GM, you would have to account for that with the way that you build your roster. So let's keep that in mind as we continue to move forward in this list. Now, why specifically do I have LeBron, KD, and Steph in the order that I have them in on the list? I'm going to get to that when we get to the mailbag. I want a quick run through the numbers for both guys first. So number 9 in our player rankings this year goes to Kevin Durant. He had his best regular season since he tore his Achilles. He played in 75 games, averaged 27.1 points per game, 6.6 rebounds, and 5 assists per game, 2.1 stocks per game. His shooting splits, 52.3% from the field, 41.3% from 3. He's actually shot over 40% from 3 in 3 of his last 4 seasons. A bunch of crazy stats today where you're going to see some of these guys showing up. Only 2 players in the entire NBA last year averaged at least 25 points on at least 50% from the field and at least 40% from 3. And it's the 2 guys we're talking about today, Kevin Durant and LeBron James. It is still really rare to be as efficient as KD and LeBron were this year. 86% free throws for KD, 58% in effective field goal percentage when you take his field goal percentage and weight it for threes, 63% in true shooting percentage when you add free throws to that equation. This is KD's 12th consecutive season with a true shooting percentage over 60%, continuing his dominant run as the most efficient volume scorer in the league. Shooting stats, per synergy, 1.11 points per jump shot, 1.24 points per catch and shoot jump shot. That's outstanding. 1.03 points per pull-up jumper. A little lower on the efficiency there. He shoots 48% overall on those pull-up jump shots. They're just mostly pull-up too, so he doesn't get as much of the additional value from the three-point shot. Did shoot 54% on floaters, but he only made 31 over the whole season, so not super high volume. Shot 72% at the rim, but this is where it gets tricky. Kevin Durant only attempted 2.9 shots per game in the restricted area. 2.9, less than 3. These are some of his forward peers, his peers at the forward position. Giannis, 11.7 attempts per game. LeBron, 7.7. Franz Wagner, 6.3. Pascal Siakam, 5.9. Julius Randle, 5.8. Jaylen Brown, 5.7. Jason Tatum, 5.4. Paolo Banchero, 5.2. Karl Anthony Towns, another big forward who primarily operates from the perimeter. Even he gets to the rim, 5.1 times per game. Kyle Kuzma gets to the rim 4.8 times per game for restricted area attempts. Kevin Durant just 2.9. So he basically doesn't get to the rim. And this has been a career-long thing for him, by the way. His last year in Golden State in 2019, just 3.6, which would have been at the bottom of that list. And his last year in Oklahoma City, going all the way back to before he went to Golden State when he was in his athletic prime, just 4.3 restricted area attempts per game. So that's been a consistent thing with him. Now, to be clear, he's a way better jump shooter than those guys. But that's the main down mark with KD. He doesn't really have another weakness. He's one of the top tier scorers in the league who brings the efficiency to boot. He's a good passer. I don't think he's in that great passer tier, but I think he's a really good passer. He can do the offensive engine thing. This was something that really kind of started to come to the surface in Brooklyn, if you guys remember. And I did a lot of talking about this when I was covering the league separately from the volume, and then even after that when I started with the volume. There was a stretch there where Kevin Durant kind of figured out the Steph Curry thing, which was, Kevin Durant's this dominant pull-up shooter, right? We talked about it earlier, shot almost 50% on pull-up jump shots this season. So what that means is as he comes off of ball screens, if you do not have a big up at the level of the screen, then KD is going to come off of that and he's going to shoot it and he's going to make it half the time, right? Especially if he gets a decent screen set. So that puts you in a predicament as the defense where you almost always have to have your big up at the level of the screen. From there, as we've talked about, every time you bring your big up to the level of the screen and the guard is, or whoever's guarding KD is chasing over the top, those two guys are now effectively on the ball. So as your big man kind of slips out of that, you have a 4-on-3 there. And there are all sorts of different reads you can make, right? If they tag that roller, there's a skip pass. If they don't tag the roller, you hit the roller. There's an advantage with KD because he's so damn tall. What a lot of teams will do in those situations, and this is something that one of the reasons why Steph over the years has struggled a little bit with turnovers, he gets these super aggressive coverages, but he's 6'3", and it's a little bit harder to get the ball over those traps and over those blitzes, and even just a good high hands contest from a big man who comes up to the level of the screen, it can be challenging. But Kevin Durant's 7 feet tall. So all he has to do, and you can see it's so funny, I watched a bunch of Kevin Durant pick and roll this morning, and it's something that has always stood out to me as I've watched him over the years. He can kind of take a relatively relaxed approach to pick and roll creation because all he really has to do is engage that screen defender by coming off the ball screen. And then you'll see him kind of take a step back, just pick up his dribble and just pop it right over the top to the guy that's slipping to the rim or throw that skip pass if it's there. And it's because he has that physical gift, that height to be able to easily see over the top. We talk about this all the time, but when it comes to defense, one of the best ways to give your defense an advantage in rotation is to either force a looping pass, meaning in order to get the ball over the contest, you have to throw it on an arc, which means the ball's in the air longer, which means as your guys are rotating, they have more time to get to their next rotation, or to get a deflection. Doesn't matter how good your 4-on-3 advantage is, if you get a deflection on the pass, and now all of a sudden that pass is going to be bobbled, or the offensive player is going to have to come back to get it, or hell, maybe even force a turnover there. And so that's been a big part of what's made KD such a successful playmaker over the years, is he's just become an unbelievable passer in those situations because of his height. It's unfair. He can just easily just drop the ball over the top. And so again, He's one of the top tier scorers in the league with the efficiency to bring it. He's a good passer. He can do the offensive engine thing like I just was breaking down for you guys. Like he can just bring the ball up the floor and get the defense in rotation consistently. He's a very good defensive player both on the ball and off the ball, even if his effort can be inconsistent, which is something that is consistent with this tier of guys here below the top tier superstar tier. But the one down mark, the one thing with KD is he just doesn't really get to the rim. And that really comes down to a couple of different things. I think part of it comes down to just how thin he is. And that manifests in a couple of different areas, right? Like for starters, if KD's trying to drive to the basket and someone gives him a little bit of contact, like a forearm or a hip check or something like that, KD's just more susceptible to getting bumped off of his line because of the fact that he's not bringing a lot of like momentum with him because he's not particularly big and strong. And so that just makes it a little bit harder to kind of slide through those gaps. Like take for counterexample, a guy like Giannis, he only needs this tiny little gap because like he'll do that thing where he kind of gathers and like chicken wings the hell out of the on-ball defender, and then like the two guys are coming over and help, and he'll just somehow just bulldoze through the two of them and get all the way to the rim. Like KD's going to lose a lot of those battles. And that manifests in some other areas too. Like KD defensively is very useful off-ball player, could play passing lanes, very good rim protector on that weak side, very good low man, very good defensive rebounder, but like he's going to get buried by a post threat, right? Because he's not particularly big and strong. So like he can't do like the Jason Tatum thing where I'm just going to guard the opposing center if that opposing center has any sort of like offensive rebounding chops or post-up chops, right? Like that's going to be something that he struggles with. But that's really the one downside with KD is he's a little thin, which prevents him from getting to the rim and limits some of his ability to be a switchable defender as it pertains to switching onto centers. But I still think that KD on the ball is an outstanding defender because he can guard guards and wings really well just with his length and his mobility. The second piece of him not getting to the rim is just I think he's picky. And I think some of this comes down to what's happened after the injury. But the dead giveaway there is the efficiency. He shoots 72% at the rim. He shoots 72% at the rim because he only goes if it's a pretty damn good opportunity. And so he'll be super efficient, but he doesn't get there a ton. But again, guys who don't apply a ton of rim pressure, that's always going to be something that I account for just simply because I think there's a ton of advantage there in terms of collapsing the defense. When a defense really views you as a threat to get to the rim, they're just more likely to pack the paint. The second piece of it is occupying the rim protector. The more times you get to the rim and just shoot shots, it brings that big man over so that your big man can clean up stuff around the rim. It's an advantage, especially when you got someone like Jusuf Nurkic who can do some real damage on the offensive glass. Let's get into some play type data. So Kevin Durant in pick and roll was 87th percentile last year, 560 possessions to be expected as he's sharing that load with Bradley Beal and Devin Booker, but got 1.10 points per possession. That is outstanding. He personally shot 51.4% in pick and roll. Like we talked about, it shoots 48% on the season on pull-up jump shots. And as we mentioned earlier in detail, his ability to see over the defense and get passes over the top when they bring that second defender, that screen defender, up to the level of the screen. Again, that was a big thing that we started to see from KD in Brooklyn, and it's extended to Phoenix. They do a lot of guard stuff. You'll see them do it sometimes with Grayson Allen. You'll see them do it sometimes with like Josh Okogie, like where he's more rolling towards the rim. Grayson Allen's more like ghost screens and just popping right back to the three-point line. But even with Nurkic, he'll run up to set the screen and he'll just kind of roll into the lane, and then he can make the reads in those 4-on-3s. ISO situations, down year for KD. It's kind of an interesting little thing with KD. His efficiency as it pertains to one-on-one basketball actually was low for what we expect from KD, but then he was outstanding coming off of screens. So as we talked about, 1.10 coming off of on-ball screens, 1.15 points per possession coming off of off-ball screens. He shot 55% field goals on shots coming off of off-ball screens. So like when KD has a screen, he's still one of the most deadly scorers in the league. His on-an-island scoring did go down a level last year though. He had 429 ISOs, including passes, according to Synergy. Got just 388 points out of them. That's 0.90 points per possession. That's in the 41st percentile. That ranked just 22nd out of 24 players to attempt at least 250 shots out of ISO last year, or 250 possessions, I should say. Just didn't shoot well individually. KD's individual field goal percentage in ISOs last year was just 43.9%, which is obviously down from what we expect from KD. Post-ups, He was over a point per possession, but not by much. He was at 284 points on 277 post-ups. That comes out to 1.03 points per possession. That's pretty average. I want to say it's like 48th percentile. That was 12th out of the 18 players to make our high-volume post-up list with 250 reps. So definitely a down year for KD as it pertains to scoring one-on-one, like man up with a defender, but he's still about as good as you'll find in the league. Anything coming off of the screen looking to score or coming off of a screen looking to pass, as we saw in the points per possession data. So in summary, KD has definitely lost some of his athletic juice, and that's manifesting in his really low rim attempts and then just the on an island scoring, which has gone down. But he's still one of the most profoundly impactful two-way players we have in the league for several reasons. One, he's still a deadly efficient scorer coming off of any kind of screen. Two, he has the size and court vision to torch defenses as a passer coming off of those screens. And when he's engaged, he's an extremely versatile defender, both on and off the ball. Most importantly, he fits the criteria of this list very well. I've talked about how this list is kind of a combination of like regular season availability and motor, like how often you play at the top of your game in the regular season. Two, how well your game translates to the playoffs. But three, how easy is it to build around you? Again, remember, in this thought exercise, we're drafting these guys, but in theory, after we're done, we're going back around and we're drafting other players, right? And so, like, if I had KD as my number one, how would it be to build around him? If I had Joel Embiid as my number one, how would it be to build around him? And as we've talked about, I find KD to be a much easier player to build around than a Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid can only defend in one type of defensive scheme. On offense, he kind of needs everything run through him. He struggles with read and react with lots of other good basketball players on the floor. I know KD can be heliocentric. I could ask KD to bring the ball up the floor, run 25 pick and rolls every single game, and to just dominate as a heliocentric shot creator. He doesn't really play that style, but he could if I needed him to. KD can also play 5 out on the ball as the guy who's making the decisions coming off the screens. He can also play 5 out off the ball, operating more with an advantage. On the defensive end, I can use him in a switching scheme. He can pretty much guard 1 through 4 and most 5s that aren't superstars, right? He can guard off the ball in a bunch of different contexts. Jumping passing lanes more as a guy who's playing above the break. He could play the low man position. I could use him to blitz. He's got all sorts of length and athleticism to use flashing up high on the ball. If we're putting 2 on the ball, I can just do so much more with KD if I'm building a team around him than I can with someone like Joel Embiid. And so that for me is like a great example. Like if I'm looking at those 3 categories, regular season availability and motor is probably Kevin Durant's biggest weakness out of those 3 categories, but he just had a season where he played, 75 games? What was the number again? I'm looking at it. 75. So he just played 75 games. So whatever your regular season availability concerns are, he just had his best season of that since his injury. Postseason translatability, I had a comment yesterday talking about how KD isn't a good playoff player, and I just very much disagree with that. He did have a rough series in 2022 against Boston, but that was literally just 4 games. Overall, in 31 playoff games since returning from his Achilles injury, he's averaging 30 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists on 61% true shooting. So by any measure, he is still one of the most dependably good playoff players in the league. So, again, had a good available regular season last year, although that I would argue that's his one main kind of weakness is how consistent can he be in the 82. Postseason translatability, I give him an A. In versatility, how well he fits alongside other players and how many different schemes he can play in, I'd give him an A+. I think he's one of the best in the league at plugging into playing in any different basketball circumstances. And even as it pertains to the injuries, they were all regular season injuries. He never missed a playoff game since coming back in 2021. And a lot of them were fluky. Like there was the one weird one where he kind of twisted his ankle in warmups. There was I think he had 2 separate instances where someone fell into his knee. Like just someone fell into his knee. That's not necessarily a durability concern. That's a fluky injury that might happen. So like, again, I understand, and this for all 3 guys, for KD, Steph, and LeBron, there's going to be a lot of guys talking about like first round sweep or, first round gentleman sweep or always in the play-in or whatever it is or miss the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. Basketball is a team sport. And these are guys that are playing on rosters that literally do not have good two-way players outside of their stars. And that's just something as you go up in the league, as you look at Oklahoma City, as you look at Denver, as you look at Boston, as you look at the Knicks, like all these teams have like 4 or 5 role players who are legitimately good on both ends of the floor, which just makes playing basketball a lot easier and is certainly going to accentuate what stars bring to the table. So KD was one of those guys a lot of people had lower on their list. I still think he's firmly in the top 10. I have him at number 9 in this year's list. We had the appetizer last week, and now we're getting the full feast. College football is back. Don't miss any of the action. Jump in at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's a full slate of games for week 1, including the big matchup in Atlanta between the preseason number 1 and number 16. This is going to be DraftKings' biggest college football season to date. Enjoy the ride now all the way through the expanded playoffs. Plus, all newbies getting into college spirit, here's something extra special. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings all college football season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. You know, whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. That's the reason the Toyota Camry has been America's best-selling sedan for the past 22 years. And the all-new Camry takes it to a new level. It comes equipped with a standard 225 horsepower engine and available sport-tuned suspension, providing power, speed, and agility. Think of the Camry as your typical swingman. And it's a good-looking car, too. The Camry racing on the 2025 NASCAR circuit was based on the racing-inspired design of the all-new Camry, with available features including two-tone midnight black metallic roof and rear spoiler and 19-inch alloy wheels. The interior is just as fly. The Camry has a modern interior design with available features like a leather-trimmed steering wheel and multi-stage heated and ventilated front seats. We're talking fundamentals and flash. You don't see that combo often on the court or on the road. And because every all-new Camry is a hybrid, it has awesome fuel efficiency with up to an EPA estimated 51 miles per gallon combined. Whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. Learn more at toyota.com/Camry. Number 8. LeBron James, last year, 71 games played, 25.7 points per game, 7.3 rebounds per game, 8.3 assists per game. Here's another crazy stat for you. LeBron James was one of just 3 players in the entire NBA last year to average at least 25 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. It was LeBron James, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic. That's it in the entire league. The all-around play that LeBron brings to the table is still extremely rare around the league. 1.8 stocks per game. His shooting splits, this is insane. 54% from the field, 41% from 3, 75% from the line. That amounts to 60% in effective field goal percentage and 63% in true shooting percentage. He's still, even as he's coming into his age 40 season, one of the most efficient volume scorers in the league. Only 2 players in the NBA last year, as we mentioned earlier with Kevin Durant, averaged at least 25 on 50% from the field and 40% from 3. It was Kevin Durant and LeBron James. And the crazy thing is, LeBron got better as the season went along. From the over his last 22 games, and I want to say this was like February 23rd on or something like that. I can't remember the exact number. But over LeBron's last 22 games, he averaged 28 points, 8 rebounds, and 10 assists on 58% from the field and 45% from 3. 28, 8, and 10 on 67% true shooting. That's not like good for LeBron. That's MVP level production that he put up over the final third of the season or so. And then he followed it up with an impressive series against Denver. 28 points, 7 rebounds, 9 assists, 64% true shooting. He also shot 4 out of 5 from the field in clutch situations. Remember, after the Western Conference Finals sweep, I said the Lakers needed to improve in 3 areas to surpass Denver. The first 2 were roster related. I won't get into right now, but it had to do with Rob Pelinka and what he needed to do over the summer. The last one, though, if you guys remember, I said LeBron James and Anthony Davis had to hit jump shots. They had to hit jump shots over the top of the defense to keep up with Jokic and Murray in a shootout, especially in crunch time. And LeBron did that. He went in the gym, he figured it out, and he did that. He shot 39% on threes in the series. After getting just 0.86 points per jump shot in the 2023 sweep, he bumped that all the way up to 1.06 points per jump shot. So a massive improvement year over year in jump shooting. But the problem was those first two roster-related issues just simply were not addressed. So even though LeBron brought the jump shooting, even though LeBron brought the clutch shot making, it just wasn't enough to make it any more than a competitive 5-game loss. And again, that series was closer than it looked. You had 2 Jamal Murray game winners in that game. That series could have been 3-2 Lakers very easily if a couple of things go differently. But then LeBron followed that up by winning MVP of the Olympics, by essentially being a Swiss Army knife for them on both ends of the floor. So the point is, LeBron has actually been one of the 5 best basketball players on the planet since February. I'd argue he's been the 3rd best player. Behind Jokic and Luka, LeBron is the only player that he's been better than everyone else in the league since February, except for those 2 guys. Now, he's lower on this list for the same age-related stuff that we're going to get to shortly, the same stuff that's plaguing everybody that's down on this part of the list. But just make no mistake, there's not many players playing better basketball than LeBron at this point in time. Shooting stats per synergy, 1.11 points per jump shot, 1.27 points per catch and shoot jump shot, an outstanding catch and shoot season for LeBron. There were 117 players in the league who attempted at least 200 catch and shoot jump shots. LeBron ranked 15th out of those 117 players in catch and shoot efficiency. He also got 0.96 points per off the dribble jumper. That was 63rd percentile, so above average. Obviously not as good as his skill-oriented peers. Like I think KD, if I remember correctly, KD was at 1.03 and then Steph was at 1.05. So they're both like roughly 10% better in that vicinity than LeBron as a pull-up shooter. But LeBron had I say 10% relative, not 10% in percentage. But LeBron's still a above average pull-up jump shooter, 44% on floaters, 47% on hooks. This is an interesting piece though. LeBron, 67% at the rim. Now that's still outstanding. That's 83rd percentile, but this is an interesting trend to keep an eye on with LeBron. He is starting to trend down in that department. 67% at the rim this year, 69% at the rim the year before, 71% at the rim the year before that, and 72% at the rim the year before that. So we've seen a steady kind of like trending down very slightly in LeBron's rim finishing. And that's a big part of why this late career jump shooting surge that he's having is so important for him. Playmaking stuff with LeBron. Pick and roll. 1.06 points per possession, which is in the 80th percentile. That's very good. However, just 727 possessions, so he didn't make our high volume list, but that's to be expected. He's sharing touches, kind of similar to KD with Booker and Beal. LeBron's sharing pick and roll touches with D'Lo and Austin Reeves. But he was, again, in the 80th percentile for pick and roll. ISO, similar to KD, not as too great of a season, 0.97 points per possession on 328 reps. Only 3 spots ahead of where KD was in that high volume list. LeBron ranked 19th out of 24 players to attempt at least 250. However, in the post, LeBron James was the 2nd best high-volume post player in the entire NBA last year. He ran 291 post-ups, got 1.12 points per possession, including passes. Only Nikola Jokic was better out of the 18 players to run at least 250 post-ups. So LeBron still absolutely dominant with his back to the basket when he can bully players towards the rim and play make out of that as teams send multiple defenders. There are 2 weaknesses with LeBron that I want to call attention to. 1, he can be one of the most inconsistent effort guys in the regular season among the stars. That's to be expected. He turns 40 4 months from today. But it's a reality when you're trying to build a roster around him, right? Just like I was talking about with KD. So on defense, the main area you'll see that manifest with LeBron is him just, he has a very important job within the Laker defense. He's typically the low man. That means AD is typically coming up higher to the level of the screen. LeBron is the guy kind of filling in behind him to tag the roller, contest shots at the rim, get defensive rebounds, and close out to the weak side. That is an incredibly important job on the defense. If you were ranking the roles on defense, obviously on the ball and your pick and roll defender are probably your 2 most important, but that next most important role is that low man position. And so when LeBron's being lazy down there, when he's letting roll men catch and fit, like you will see dozens of times this year, LeBron will just let someone catch on the roll and dunk because he just doesn't feel like making the rotation. Right? So like that's part of it. Not fighting for defensive rebounds, that kind of thing. Like you're going to see, he'll always lock in and do it in crunch time or whenever the team needs to go on a run or something like that. But he will have extended stretches during the course of the regular season where he just doesn't really try that hard on the defensive end of the floor. I still think LeBron's one of the better defenders in the league when he's trying. You're only going to see that big time moments, big time national TV games, and like playoff games. That's pretty much it at this phase of his career. On offense, where you see that laziness manifest is how physically aggressive he's being towards the rim. 1, being willing to post up. 2, being willing to drive hard in isolation situations. The big one you'll see, 3, is lazy playmaking in ball screens. As I've talked about a lot, in order to get an opening to make a play as a passer in ball screens, you have to engage that screen defender by getting downhill or by being deadly enough as a shooter that he has to come up. You have to make him guard you. If you do not make him guard you and he can drop back, there's not going to be anything open. And you'll see LeBron a lot in the regular season kind of dribble off picks lazy and just try to like jam a pocket pass in there that's not open, or throw a skip pass to a guy who's guarded and so he'll have to put it really high, and then the guy will have to jump way back on his heels to grab it and the advantage is gone, right? So like, or there was no advantage to begin with. And so like there are definitely some things with LeBron where he can be lazy in the regular season. He's simply not as good as his younger peers, the guys who are in their 20s, at just carrying the load time and time again over an 82-game season. That is something you have to account for when you're building a roster around him when the season starts in October. The second piece of it, even within the playoff context, when LeBron is engaged, he's not as good at doing everything as he was when he was younger in terms of energy resources. He does seem to get a little fatigued. Couple of examples. Game 1 against Denver in the third quarter, he had a stretch like I described just a second ago, where he got lazy with the ball as a playmaker because he was tired, had a couple of bad turnovers. It sparked a Denver run. Game 5 against Denver, they win that game if LeBron secures a defensive rebound against Aaron Gordon where he had inside position. Now, LeBron has been one of the best defensive rebounding forwards in the league for a long time. This is something he used to literally never lose. He never used to lose rebounding battles like that. The reason why he did is because he was doing so much, and at this phase in his career, he still is susceptible to a little bit of fatigue, and he lost a physical battle that he doesn't typically lose. And so, again, I thought he was mostly magnificent in that series outside of those sorts of things. But the point is, in order to get the most out of LeBron James, you need to surround him with enough support for him to be able to conserve energy and pick his spots. Because when he engages himself, he's still one of the very best players in the world, but he can't be consistently engaged without running into fatigue-related issues. And so again, in the regular season, it's more just like conserving energy. In the playoffs, it's like he legitimately can run out of energy sometimes. But if I were it's just something that I'd have to account for if I was a GM and I was drafting a team. Now, if we tweaked the rules, if I were drafting players for a playoff series, just a playoff series, not a season, but a playoff series that started tomorrow, Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic are the only two players that I'd take over LeBron. That's how insane of a high level he's been playing at since February. He's still one of the top tier shot creators in the league in both volume and efficiency. As we know, there just aren't many players who can give you 25 points and 8 assists a game. Jokic, Luka, and Trae Young were the only other guys in the league last year, other than LeBron, to give you 25 points and 8 assists. That's how rare that is still in this league. And LeBron, when he's engaged, is a much better defender than all of those guys. And that's why I have him that high. I'd have him third if I just needed to win a series that starts tomorrow. But he requires a great deal of support in the regular season and can't quite scale up his athleticism in the postseason like he used to, which makes the job of building around him a little bit tougher than it was when he was in his prime, and certainly tougher than some of the guys that are above him on this list. So for a list like this, I feel like number 8 is the right spot for LeBron James. On to our mailbag. Here's our first question. This one is not necessarily a question, just an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about the rankings. So what is my rationale for putting LeBron 8, KD 9, Steph 10? Why did I have them ranked in that order? Now, mind you, I have them minusculely separated. This is not tiers of players. They're all jammed up with each other, right? As I've said multiple times, from 5 to 11, they're all right next to each other, in my opinion. The tiers are more indicated as a separation in level of play. So here's the deal. Steph was a clear third place for me. In addition to missing the playoffs, even if we all agree that it mostly had to do with the roster, Steph just didn't play well to end the season. Post All-Star break, Steph Curry, 23 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 57% true shooting. LeBron James, 28 points, 8 rebounds, 10 assists, 67% true shooting. Like, that's just a simple example to show you guys the giant chasm in the level of play between those two guys. 10 percentage points in true shooting, 10 additional assists, 3 additional rebounds, 5 additional points every game. KD and LeBron both are just simply playing at a higher level than Steph. Now, I understand Steph had 2 really good games at the end of the Olympics. And I personally am really excited about that. And it's a big part of why I think he's going to have a bounce back year. But I can't just take those 2 games to erase months of additional evidence that KD and LeBron are just playing at a higher level right now. And then between KD and LeBron, I thought LeBron was clearly at the higher level among the 3 for all the reasons that I just broke down in the 2 breakdowns that I did. So that naturally left KD in the middle. So like, again, I thought the LeBron, KD, Steph in that order was pretty straightforward. Had a bunch of Steph-related questions, so let's get into some of those right now. You are entitled to your opinion, but having Steph Curry below Anthony Davis, KD, or Anthony Edwards at this point in their careers is blasphemous. AD cannot, I repeat, cannot be a number 1 option on a championship team. He is probably the best defender in the league, but he's insanely limited on offense. If your list is just based on October through June, picking the best player for your team, you really taking AD over Steph sounds a bit like Lakers fan bias to me, coming from a Lakers fan myself. Ant is still way too raw to be taken over Curry, and KD's team underachieves time and time again, despite him really being a plug-and-play masterpiece of a player. It's just that, you can't count on him being that alpha dog, and Steph is just a killer. One could even argue that Tatum should be below Curry too, but defensive versatility, age, availability, and champ status certainly give him the case to be above. But again, are you really taking Tatum over your number 1 guy, as your number 1 guy over Steph friggin' Curry? Nah. As for Embiid, I don't have a problem with him at 11. He's an overhyped crybaby that's always hurt, always sulking, foul grifting, and just looking for a whistle if he can't assert physical dominance or if his jumper isn't falling. Way too one-dimensional, way too fragile, way too mentally weak to take for an 82-game run, especially deep in the playoffs when his parlor tricks stop working with the refs. I'd take any of these top 10 guys over him any day of the week. Awesome show, brother. Keep up the good work and keep creating a platform for us hoop lovers to talk real basketball, unbiased and educated, based on arguments and facts, not just blatant smack talk, fangirling, and personal preference/opinion. Thank you for taking the time to break down your basketball case. Thanks for supporting the show. One of my favorite things about what we do here at Hoops Tonight is make just a community for hoopers to hang out and talk basketball. So that means a lot to me that you guys see it that way. I'll go kind of down the list. So the first comment you made about Anthony Davis saying that he's insanely limited on offense, I kind of disagree with that. First of all, we know AD can be the best player on a championship team because Tatum just did it. So like you certainly can build a championship roster around Anthony Davis. You just probably would need a little more help than some of the guys that are above him, right? As far as the offense thing, like, yeah, I think I think Anthony Davis had a rough series 2 years ago, the Western Conference Finals series. I thought Jokic kicked his ass. I thought AD kind of went out soft. Like, I didn't think he fought hard enough in that circumstance. Like, I think he kind of let Jokic walk all over him. But if you just kind of pull that specific series out, he's been an incredible playoff player outside of that. He just averaged 28 points per game in the playoffs against Denver. He was straight up barbecuing Jokic in one-on-one. He ran 34 ISOs and post-ups in the series and got 40 points. That's 1.18 points per possession, which is literally amazing. And I mean, we got to, like, obviously the 2022-2021 seasons, he was hurt, but it's like 2020, best player, or not best player, but like just as good as LeBron. Like, I had LeBron 1 and 84 after that playoff run. So like AD was basically at LeBron's level for a title run and was an incredible offensive player and an incredible defensive player. And then I want to say he had 13 playoff games before 2020, and he averaged like 31 points and 13 rebounds a game. So like the idea that he's an insanely limited offensive player is just something that I would disagree with. He just had a really rough offensive series against Denver 2 years ago when they faced him in the Western Conference Finals. Now, is he as good offensively as some of the other superstars in the league? No, but he's still an insanely good offensive player. Like, and here's the other thing too, even beyond the on-ball stuff, I think it's unfair if we give Jokic like a ton of bonus points for being this deadly roll man who like catches on the roll with Jamal Murray and hits those floaters in the lane. And there's no doubt that Jokic is probably the best at that, and he's certainly better than AD. But AD is also one of the best roll men in the league. And he's a huge part of what makes the Laker pick and roll attack so deadly, because he can short roll and make floaters, right? Or he can short roll to the foul line and catch and make quick ISO moves off the catch. He can roll a little bit further into the lane and make floaters, right? Or quick dribble moves into hook shots. He can also roll hard to the rim, and he brings vertical gravity, like the actual spacing to be able to throw lob passes to him. Like, AD is a far more useful offensive player than I think people give him credit for. As for Kevin Durant, Anthony Edwards, without getting into all the individual comparisons, here's what I'll say. Remember that if I said everyone is healthy and the series is starting tomorrow, I'm doing a different list. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going Jokic and Luka, and then I have LeBron 3. Steph's probably 4 for me on that list. So when everyone's healthy, I do think Steph is a better player than Ant. I do think Steph is a better player than KD. I do think Steph is a better player than AD. But the point is, Steph hasn't been playing at that level as of late. Here's a simple stat to break this down. Steph, in his last 19 games to end last year, failed to reach 25 points in 9 of them. Think about that. When they desperately needed him to score because they don't have much offensive talent, he couldn't even get to 25 points in half the games over the final fourth of the season. I am genuinely, sincerely rooting for Steph to have a bounce back year. And I believe he will. But it's all theoretical at this point, which makes him a riskier pick, which puts him lower on this type of list. As far as the Embiid piece goes, I'm actually surprised at how many people kind of agreed with me. There are obviously some pissed off Sixers fans. That was to be expected. But it seems to me like most of the other people, at least maybe not as far down as 11, but at least agree that Embiid can't be on that top tier superstar list anymore when you're factoring in all of his physical limitations in terms of health and his inability to impact winning as well as he does in the regular season when he gets to the postseason. And the thing with Embiid too is now he's over 30. So it's not like the health issues are going to get better for him at this point. Putting together a top 25 list is tough work considering all the talent in the league, so I commend you doing the work and sharing with the viewers. If your criteria for the list is based on who you would pick for an 82-game season out of a vacuum, it doesn't make sense to put Curry at 10, considering the lack of help on his team was directly responsible for the efficiency slumps this past year. When you put Curry on an all-star team or an Olympic roster, or even when his team plays like above-average NBA players, a la the 2022 playoffs, he is clearly an MVP candidate even in this late stage of his career. An important note about Steph's game is the attention he demands when he's on the floor, which cannot be quantified from counting stats since he's arguably the most heavily guarded player in NBA history. Put Shea on the Warriors, and I would argue they don't even sniff a play-in spot in the stacked Western Conference. Having won the chip only 2 years ago over a better team holds far more weight than Ant or Shea, who are projected to have better seasons, neither of which are guarded like Steph. So here's the thing. As far as I agree that the Warriors are extremely limited, in terms of personnel. And I also agree that made things harder for Steph. Here's where it's different, though. The 2021 team was very limited as well. They had no Klay Thompson, if you remember. They had funky role players, guys like Kelly Oubre Jr. and Brad Wanamaker and Kent Bazemore. And yet, in that season, Steph averaged 32 points per game on 66% true shooting. He had 26 games with at least 35 points. He wasn't even close to that level this year. So, like, if your case is Steph is still awesome, he just has a bad team, what happened in 2021? Like, that's where I have an issue. And that team had the exact same issue. Made it to the play-in, got eliminated in the play-in tournament. And so, yeah, like, I sympathize with Steph for the plight. And I do believe he still has the ability to get to a top 10 level this year, which is why I put him in the top 10, and I expect him to bounce back. But he was down in every major statistical category last year and was tailing off at the tail end of the season. So, again, as I mentioned, big game tomorrow night, give me Steph as the 4th best player in the league. But that's not the reality of this season. There's a great deal of risk involved with Steph being your foundational piece for this season. Therefore, I had him at 10 for the sake of the way this list works. I'm shocked Curry is this low. I understand why, because he had a down year because he's old. But man, I might be biased as a Warriors diehard, but I don't know how you could watch the medal rounds in the Olympics and not feel like Steph is one of the 5 best players in the world. Here's the thing. The medal rounds are a big source of optimism for me as well, but 2 games when the chips are down, that falls into what I was talking about earlier. Yeah, you're right. 2 games, chips are down. I think Steph is the 4th best player in the world. But this isn't 2 games where the chips are down. This is 82 games and 4 series spanning 9 months. Totally different type of criteria. Here's another Steph one. Bunch of them. But we don't. I promise we get into some other stuff. Hey, Jason, I've agreed for the most part so far in your rankings. However, Steph's ranking is the first time I strongly disagree with your ranking, and I'm a non-Warriors fan, by the way. You begin your argument by referring to Steph's extended slump to end the regular season and through the majority of the Olympics. I think this is fair criticism. However, I would argue Tatum's slump is equally as bad, if not worse, than Steph's, and therefore should be ranked lower than Steph in the rankings. I believe the main factor in this argument is their scenarios. Steph was dealing with unideal situations in Golden State, unlike Draymond's. Steph was dealing with unideal situations in Golden State, like Draymond's emotional immaturity, Klay's frustrations, tons of lineup changes, roster injuries, etc. Meanwhile, Tatum was operating on the most talented roster in the league. I don't think it's fair to drop Steph this far below the environment he was working in. Besides that, Curry is still a much better half-court shot maker than Tatum, which is your main factor when making this list. Not just as an on-ball creator, but through his off-ball ability. The amount of quality shots he generates for his team simply by existing in the half-court greatly exceeds anything that Tatum showed during the playoffs in the last half of the year. I'd also argue for Curry above Ant and AD for the same reason, although the Tatum comparison is my primary reason for commenting. Love the show. Thanks for supporting the show. I mean, it means a lot to me. So, a couple things. Tatum slump's a little different. Tatum is a in his prime athlete who's in a jump shooting slump. Steph Curry declined in every single phase of the game last year, including the defensive end of the floor, including just his ability to get separation from defenders, all that kind of stuff. So it's not necessarily the same to me. I will admit that I ranked Tatum under the impression that his shot is going to come back around. Because again, over a large sample in his career, he's been a good jump shooter. He's had a bad jump shooting stretch. I mean, we've had our criticisms with Tatum in terms of off the dribble shooting, but he should still be a much, much better catch and shoot player than he has been. He's just been in a slump. But again, it's a little different when you're Tatum's age. You're in your late 20s, you're in your prime. I would be shocked if Tatum didn't come into next season with a revamped jump shot ready to go. But like the bottom, let's just take Tatum for an example as what I mean when I talk about the value over the 82, okay? Let's say I drafted Tatum because I had, the pick that I have Tatum ranked at, which I'm not going to reveal yet. But let's say I drafted Tatum. I'm going to get 75 games out of him. Like he's going to play 75 games. Or at least around there. I think he played 74 the last 2 years, right? So like going to play mid-70s in games. He's going to bring motor every single night because he's in his 20s and he's just young and, he just has a lot of that youthful exuberance, right? He's going to play hard. We're going to get the better version of Tatum the vast majority of nights. 3, he's going to be a foundational piece to my defense and rebounding backline. I'm going to be able to use him to guard star forwards if I need to. I'm going to be able to use him to guard guards even if I need to. I'm going to be able to use him to guard centers if I want to, just like Boston did through their entire playoff run. I can use him as the low man if I need to. I could count on him to help secure the defensive rebounding part of my defensive backline. That's a huge asset to me as I'm building a team around him. 4, he's going to give me somewhere between 27 and 30 points per game. That's basically guaranteed. He's going to give me 8 or 9 rebounds. That's basically guaranteed. He's going to give me 5+ assists. It's a super safe bet. If I take Tatum, I know what I'm getting from October all the way to June. If I take Steph, there's 2 versions of that story. There's everything somehow breaks right and he gets back to form and he stays healthy and I get superstar Steph. And yeah, you're damn right. That's a better player. Put it simply, guys, like basketball is a team sport. If I put Steph on the Boston Celtics for Jason Tatum, the Celtics are winning the title again. So like, yeah, I'm not debating that Tatum's had it easy. Of course he has. He's flat out had it easy. He had the easiest title run I've seen from a star in a very long time. Right? So like, I'm not trying to debate that, but we're looking at these guys in a vacuum. If I was drafting players at Tatum's age, I know I'm getting 75 games. I know I'm getting high motor. I'm getting excellent defense and rebounding, and I'm getting 27 and 5, or at least. in terms of points and assists. He is a super safe bet. And so in this list that has a very, very tight grouping from 5 to 11, I'm giving Tatum a slight edge for the 82. Now, to be clear, if I had to win a single game tomorrow or a single series tomorrow, give me Steph over Tatum 100 out of 100 times. I do not think Tatum is better at basketball than Steph. I just think he's younger and healthier and more likely to provide more winning impact over a 9-month span where anything can happen. And I know I've explained that 100 times during this list, but I just feel like I need to hammer that home. The rankings are not important. The basketball talk is the only thing that matters. It's our next comment. Amen. We do this to kill time in the summer and to give us something to argue about. But in the words of Kevin Durant, when October comes around, it's check ball, and we're playing basketball, and everyone's 0-0, and every player's averaging 0.0 rebounds, 0 assists. Let's see what everyone can do. If I have Steph at 10 and I'm actively rooting for him to bounce back, that has no bearing on what actually is going to happen for the Warriors this year, and we're going to cover it thoroughly. This is what we do during the summer, but what I love to do, my favorite thing about this show is to talk about basketball games. It's why I was so thankful for those Team USA games this summer. Well, how great was that we got another couple dozen games between Team USA and some of the other teams that we covered to just talk about basketball, actual basketball games that are actually happening. And so I appreciated that comment because that is the truth. The rankings are not important. The basketball talk, well, I would just remove talk from that and just say the basketball is the only thing that matters. And that's what I love to talk about the most. And that's what we're going to do literally here in less than 2 months. Can you believe that? We're less than 2 months away. We are 1 month away from training camp, guys. It's right around the corner. Next question, or I should say comment. Y'all have to understand this is a business. Having Curry at 10 is going to get him a lot of clicks and engagement. He knows Curry is top 5 at worst. This is just silly. I mean, the Warriors are probably still our largest fan base within the Hoops Tonight community. We have some big ones, right? Like we have a lot of Laker fans, a lot of Denver Nugget fans, a lot of Dallas Mavericks fans, a lot of Boston Celtics fans. We've built up like certain fan bases that we have a good chunk of that follow our show. But I still think the Warriors are the largest fan base that we have. And a big part of that is Steph. Steph's one of the most popular players in the world. But like I would have gotten more views by putting Steph number 1. That's what would have gotten views. But it's legitimately hard for me to do this and to actually put these guys in the right spot. And I'm working really hard to follow my own criteria. It was tough for me to put KD, Steph, and LeBron as low as I did. But I'm not here to propagandize. I'm not here to lie and say things I don't believe for clicks. That's not even how it works. I put KD, Steph, and LeBron where I would draft them in a snake draft style, or a snake draft it's not even relevant, but just in a straight up draft between 25 teams, starting with all 450 players, just to start a franchise with. That's the entire purpose of it, only for this upcoming season from October to June. I put Steph at 10 because I view him as the 10th safest bet to build a franchise around for this upcoming season for 82 games and 4 series. Dude is saying, I still think he's top 10 like that's a compliment. It is a compliment. Steph didn't play at a top 10 level last year. Steph did not have a top 10 season last year by any measure. Guys like Donovan Mitchell had a better season. Guys like Jalen Brunson had a better season. Like there are a lot of players who had better seasons than Steph Curry last year. I'm giving him top 10 as a payment of respect to what I believe he is capable of on a better roster. And because I think he's going to bounce back. I'm projecting a better season from Steph next year. That's why I have him at number 10. He requires a ton of regular season support as well as postseason support. Who are you talking about, Tatum or Embiid? And you got Tatum higher, that's comedy. So, in my opinion, Tatum is the far more available regular season player. And he's actually been a better playoff player than Embiid, including outplaying him head-to-head. Specifically in Game 7 a few years back, he exposed one of Embiid's biggest weaknesses that we talked about on this show, his ability to come out and guard in space, either switching in pick and roll or coming up to the level of the screen. Tatum was just repeatedly torching him in that game 7. So putting Tatum over Embiid was a very easy decision for me. He's a more available regular season player, and he's been a better postseason player in his career. That was just a no-brainer for me. Here's another basketball case from somebody as it associates to Embiid, specifically with regard to Anthony Davis. Hey Jason, love the video. I know you haven't released AD's ranking, but here's a basketball reason why I'm taking Embiid over Anthony Davis. First, both players have struggled with injuries. I know AD has been more durable than Embiid the past 2 years, but it's undeniable that if you're concerned with both's long-term health in any given season, so durability is mostly a wash between these two players. Second, I think Embiid's playoff struggles are almost exclusively due to injury, whereas AD's playoff struggles post-2020 have been consistency and mentality related. Especially against Jokic in the last couple playoff runs, AD would have 30-plus points one night and then 15 or 16 the next night, even though he wasn't injured. Commentators often lament during games how AD seems to be out of it and not being aggressive, which is never a problem for Embiid. AD post-2020 has not been that great of a playoff performer in my view, at least not good enough for the Lakers to beat Denver. Finally, and most importantly, Embiid eats AD's lunch every time they play. Yes, it's regular season, but Embiid is 7-1 against AD in their last 2 matchups. Embiid had 38-12 and a 30-point triple-double on 75% and 60% shooting, respectively. AD's best case for being higher than Embiid is he's a much better defender than Embiid. The fact that his superior defense doesn't affect Embiid when they play is evidence to me that Embiid is a full tier above AD as a player. Appreciate the content, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the rankings. Again, thank you for taking the time to break down your basketball case, and thank you for supporting the show. It means a lot to me. So, starting with injury risk. I disagree there. I don't think it's a wash between both players. AD has had some health concerns, particularly in the 2021 and 2022 seasons, but he's been good since then. And I actually think it's far more likely that Embiid has a health-related issue this year than AD. Now, obviously, anything can happen, and we'll see. But my read on things is like Embiid is a guy that like it almost feels like a certainty that he'll break down, whereas AD it feels like it's a maybe. And so I don't think that they're on the same tier, although I agree with you that both of them do have some health concerns. I just think it's Embiid to a larger extent. As I mentioned earlier, AD did have a rough series in 2023 against Denver. There's no question about it. And I was very critical of him after that series. But he's been literally awesome in every playoff run outside of that. Even just before that series. Like before the Denver series where they got swept, AD was like so good defensively in the Golden State Warriors series that every adjustment that both teams was making was geared around the Warriors trying to avoid AD and the Lakers trying to keep AD in the action. That's how dominant he was defensively in that playoff run. He was the best player on the Lakers because LeBron wasn't as good. He was playing with that hurt foot, if you remember, during that playoff run. So, like, he was awesome in the playoff run before the Nuggets series. Then this past year, I thought he basically played Jokic to a draw. He averaged 28 points and 16 rebounds. Like, straight up fried Nikola Jokic one-on-one. Then again, obviously hurt 2021 and 2022, but 2020, incredible both ends of the floor. They win the title. First 13 playoff games before 2020, he averaged 31 and 13. So, like, I think AD's playoff resume is substantially better than Embiid's. Just flat out, bar none. I don't think it's close, to be honest. And to put it more aggressively, I just think AD is a better basketball player in that setting because he's so good defensively, because he thrives in rock fights, because he can, like, win when things get ugly, because his impact on winning is not tied to whether or not he's getting to the foul line or knocking down his jump shot. Now, here's the thing. Everything with Embiid is theoretical. He has a remarkably dominant level that he can get to. He's certainly had remarkably dominant regular seasons that have eclipsed what AD has done in the regular season. But we can keep imagining that all coming together all we want. We can imagine Embiid just wrecking ball everybody through the playoffs. Hell, I've been imagining it. We talked about it on the show. But for whatever reason, that has never actually materialized. And then the last piece of it, to the big piece of our criteria, that like versatility, how easy it is to build around you, AD is much easier to build around. He is a prototypical 5-out big man who excels as a roll man, as a screening and rolling into space, as a scorer with and without the ball. He plays really well alongside other stars. He doesn't require the ball to be in his hands all the time. And he's the best defensive player in the world that can defend in any scheme that you want him to defend in. Deep drop, catch hedge, up at the level, blitzing, switching. He can do it all. So, like, that's the thing. Like, there's no doubt that Embiid's ceiling is higher than AD. That just goes without saying. But Embiid just can't get there often enough. And when things get to those higher levels, AD has just played at a much higher level far more consistently than Embiid. And again, like, yes, he has some offensive limitations, but in the regular season, even as I'm drafting players, if I draft AD, you know how much easier everything else gets for me at that point? Look at the Lakers defense. They were playing literally two, like, Austin Reeves, an average defensive player, D'Lo, a bad defensive player, Rui Hachimura, a bad defensive player, LeBron James, good defensive player when he's trying, most of the time he's not trying, and AD anchors it all and just hides them all. That's a huge asset to a general manager. Yeah, so like, yeah, it's hard to do this kind of thing, guys. It really is. It's painstaking. Let's say the two guys that everyone kept throwing out today. If I would have put Ant at 11 and AD at 10, you don't think Minnesota Timberwolves fans are going to be crying to me nonstop about how Anthony Edwards averaged 28 points on 60% true shooting in the playoffs and, like, eliminated the defending champs, straight up alpha dogged everybody on the Phoenix Suns, and got within 3 wins of the NBA Finals? You don't think I'm going to have people crying about that? Anthony Davis, like, he was what, the 4th best player on the Olympic team, the 5th best player on the Olympic team. He is the best defensive player in the world. Just played Nikola Jokic to pretty much even in that. Like, the differentiators in that series were like Michael Porter Jr. and the fact that Rui was terrible. The swing. LeBron and AD LeBron and AD outplayed Murray and Jokic in that series, and they lost the series in 5 because LeBron outplayed Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray hit 2 big shots, and Michael Porter Jr. made everything he got his hands on, and Aaron Gordon had a dominant game 3, and the Lakers just got no contributions from role players outside of Austin Reeves. And again, if I would have put AD at 10, it just would have been an issue. It would have just been a whole other issue. And that's the thing. There was no version of this top 11 that wasn't going to piss people off. But at the end of the day, all I can do is kind of give you guys my reasoning and hear you guys out when you disagree, and we can go from there. But as I'm going to reread this comment from earlier, as the gentleman shared earlier, the rankings are not important. The basketball is the only thing that matters. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We'll be back on Friday with number 7 and number 6. I will see you guys then.